Chief Financial Officers, or CFOs as they're called, are the ones responsible for overseeing the financial activities of an entire company. What you might not think of is that these CFOs are also instrumental in enabling the transition to a green economy that works for all stakeholders. Artificial intelligence, geopolitical uncertainty, increasing and conflicting regulations, and investor pressure put CFOs at the center of decisions that will impact the pathway to a more sustainable and prosperous future. So how can the CFOs help shape the future of sustainable finance? How can they contribute to meaningful climate action? These are some of the topics we'll discuss during this session, and I will now hand over to Ingmar Rentzhog, the CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time, who will set the stage with the help of Angela Hultberg, Global Sustainability Director at Kearney. So, stay tuned. And I pan that over, and I take this on.
Hi, Angela. Thanks for joining us. We're used to hear a lot of CEOs, Chief Sustainability Officers, and also heads of states talking about climate. But so far, and especially among corporations, the financial people, the financial directors, are often not speaking so much about climate action. And as we know, not many things are happening in a company if you don't have the CFO with you. So that's what we're going to focus here today. And we don't have time also partnering up with Kearney to know more about what's in the head of CFOs. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're going to do here?
Absolutely, and first of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for bringing this topic to the top of the agenda. Because you're absolutely right, of course. Not much can happen in a business unless the CFO is on board, and what we see is that while we've heard so much about commitments and everything businesses want to do, we sometimes lack hearing, what's the business case behind it? And we already know that this is one of the main things keeping companies back. It comes with a cost, or, as I like to phrase it, an investment rather. And so what we thought about together was that, look, we have to find out what CFOs are thinking, We have to figure out what the ones who are doing things, why are they doing it, so we can share it with others. And for those who aren't working very quickly, what do they need, and what do they see, and how do they think about these things? Because I think for many, many years in the business community, and remember, Ingmar, the businesses are the ones who actually have to do the green business, right? And usually when we talk about finance, we talk about, global north to global south, and we talk about countries, we talk about big groups of investors going in. We hear these announcements all the time, a group of investors were 10 trillion, blah, 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 invest. But the business community are the ones who actually has to do the green transition and keep existing as businesses in a more sustainable way. And that's why we want to hear from the CFO, the financial officers, to really understand what do they need to accelerate. If something's keeping them, what is it? Are there differences across the world? To really get to the bottom of how we can accelerate the transition.
Yeah, and what I also read was that if you take a company, many times they have a cash position, and the CFO is deciding on where to put the money in the bank, literally. And many banks are still investing in fossil fuel. That means that many big companies with a lot of cash position, a lot of cash in the bank, are actually having most of their carbon footprint in their bank account. And it's very easy to contact your bank and ask question, are you in line with the Paris Agreement? Do you lend to fossil fuel extraction, etc.? And if they have no good answer on that, it can be a good solution to move the money. So not all climate action needs to have money invested. It can also be the CFO asking some tricky questions to the existing banks, and if they don't comply, they can actually change it. That will also be something that is survey that we are conducting. Will probably be quite interesting to see how many companies that are aware of this low-hanging fruit.
Exactly, because there's so many different ways you can invest in green transition, or as you say, divest from unsustainable business practices. It's the companies you invest in. Companies invest in other companies, of course, and how do you steer those investment into new technologies or into companies that are promoting more sustainable business models? How do you invest in your own operation to decarbonize, to build responsible supply chains? How do you invest in your suppliers? I mean, these are big questions, and any company has different ways of steering, if it's in their investment, if it's the pension money, if it's their own operations, or if it's through influencing their entire value chain. So there's lots to do, and this is what we want to get to the bottom of in this survey. How are you thinking about it? Are the CFOs still viewing this as a cost, or can we finally start talking about value creation? Because this is also one of the perceptions, right? That there is a conflict between sustainability and profit, and I would argue that that is simply not the case, and I'm hoping to see that come across in this survey as well.
Kearney, a global consulting firm, you have many clients, many big corporations on your client list, and you work already with a lot of CFOs.
Yes.
So you have a lot of, before the survey is done, I think you have already some knowledge about what's going on.
A few insights,
and
maybe, yeah.
Can you share some of those kind of preliminary, not yet in the survey results, but
it's always great to do a survey so you get the public data to prove you right?
Exactly.
But no, one of the things that we're seeing is really around the business case. I usually have discussions with my clients around the business case, right? That's where we are, because we have, thank God, gone from talking about commitments and what we're going to do to how we're going to do it. And that's why now it is crucial to understand how. That's also how do we finance, right? But still, in a lot of business cases, we see that it's hard to place a value on sustainability. And a lot of companies still don't measure the cost of inaction. They see an investment, they want a return of invest, it has to happen in X number of years. But what happens if, because you didn't make the investment, you lose 20% market share 9 years from now, right? They're not putting a price on that. So that's number one, that the business case evaluation models are outdated. How can you reach a 2040 target using a business model, business case from 2010? That's number one. The second one is that the gap between the leaders and the laggards is widening, right? We see those who understand where the entire business has embedded sustainability, moving towards a goal where they're using all their financial muscles to invest in sustainability. And it becomes good business being a good business, and pulling carbon out of your supply chain actually pulls cost out of your supply chain. Some understand that, and they are leading, and they are growing, and they have successfully decoupled emissions from growth. And there are others far, far behind who still thinking about it as something isolated, separate from business, and they see it as a cost. Now we have to pay, so we will feel a bit good about ourselves. And that's just so far from what it needs to be.
Isn't this a little bit strange? Because the finance people often are the best people to evaluate risks, and here is a big area where they have many, not all of course, but many have limited knowledge about the risks out there that will affect them.
I mean, the finance community, yes, they are good at valuing things, but they're like everyone else, you know. We are very comfortable with what we know, and it is very daunting to lead in the unknown, but leaders got to lead, you know. But we're in a position now and in a time now where you cannot make decisions based only on past data, and I think that's the problem, right? Because, you know, analysts love to take all the data, analyze it, and come come to a conclusion. But you cannot do that when the world is severely disrupted. You have to be a bit more daring than that. You have to take a risk to manage your risk, and I think that's what's slowing many down.
And this survey will be launched in Davos next year early.
The results. The survey is launched now.
Yeah.
Any CFO out there, please do answer. But the results will be launched in Davos during the World Economic Forum.
And what do you hope that we will achieve with it when we get it out to the world?
I hope that we will start a conversation that moves from cost reduction to value, or rather from being a cost to being a value and a growth driver. I hope we can take some really good learnings. There will be some in-depth interviews as well, and share those learnings to accelerate. I'm hoping that we can identify what's slowing everything down so we can remove those. The first part of solving any problem is identifying the problem, and that's what I hope we can do.
Yeah, you need to know the problem in order to solve it.
Exactly.
And I mean, there must be a big potential with this, because the companies that are in the forefront and have deep financial understanding on how to tackle the climate crisis, its risk and you know, opportunities, that will probably be the companies that will thrive. So maybe you can give this, maybe we should give some investment advice at the end of that report. We will see.
It's like you're saying, Matt, it's about the opportunity, and those who seize it will be the ones still in business 50 years from now, and those who don't, they won't be around 50 years from now.
Yeah, and what we want to do here at We Know Time is that we want to share this knowledge so that everyone else can pick it up, because if climate win, humanity win. If climate lose, everyone lose. So
as they say, there can be no business on a dead planet. So it's in all of our best interests.
But now we're going to change seats here, actually, because
Yes.
you're going to moderate a very interesting panel with very interesting people, and I will give you my share, and I will swap seat with you, and we're soon back with the panelists.
Thank you.
Estava falando para Marcela que eu não quero fazer. Não. Vou embora. Vou tomar férias.
Hi, my name's Angela Hultberg. I'm a Global Sustainability Director with Kearney, and I've been given the amazing task of moderating a fantastic panel for you right now. The theme of COP29 is finance, and while we're hearing a lot about which countries need to bring in finance and fund to support other countries, and which investors are coming together to make sure that millions and trillions of euros and dollars are invested in the right way, we rarely hear about the companies that actually has to do the green business transition. And that's why we have a fantastic panel here today to talk a bit about this topic. So, to my left here, I have Marcela Porto, who's the Global Director of Communications and Institutional Sustainability at Suzano. You'll tell us a bit more about what Suzano is and what you guys do later. We also have Gonzalo Munoz, doesn't need an introduction perhaps, but for those of you who have been living under a rock, he's the founder of Ambition Loop and also the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion from COP25. We have Johan Falk, the CEO and founder of Exponential Roadmap Initiative, and no stranger to this audience, we have Ingmar Renshog, the CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time. So welcome, everyone. So, like I mentioned, the theme of COP29 is finance, and we'd like to spend a bit of time talking not about countries or investors, but really about businesses and what they can do. First challenge to the panel now, because this is one of those first questions where everyone gets to answer. So keep it brief so we have time to actually get in depth. But really thinking about businesses, what role do you see that they can play in this green transition? And we'll start here.
Sure. Well, so business have a strong opportunity and also a responsibility to scale up nature-based solutions and the whole climate agenda as a whole. Corporates have been investing a lot over the last years in this agenda, in decarbonizing, in other nature-based solutions. I can obviously state that for Suzano. But for business to keep motivated in investment and investing in this agenda, it's important for us to also have some more clarity on return on investment. So it needs to be something predictable. We need frameworks. So we need to partner with governments and civil society as a whole to develop those frameworks so that our return on investments are more predictable. But basically, I really believe that the main role of businesses is to scale up those solutions faster and faster.
That's great. And we'll come back to hear more about what you guys specifically are doing. Gonzalo, same question to you. What role should and could businesses play here?
So thanks so much, Angela. And definitely, as we know that we don't have time, as the invitation refers to, we know that we've reached a point where governments by themselves won't be capable of solving not only the climate crisis but the triple environmental crisis that we're confronting, and we need not only for countries to be embracing much more the capacity and the speed and scale that businesses can provide, but businesses to be much more proactive on searching for private-public partnerships and collaboration in order to show what can be achieved. So at this point, there's a matter also of companies showing the type of innovations that we know the world requires. So we know how much the world required, and of course Marcela will talk about it in terms of what Suzano can provide, let's say, in terms of land restoration and sequestration of carbon. We know how much companies can achieve while committing together, as I know Johan will talk about it. Like, imagine a world where every company commits, then you don't have to consider the scope 3, right?
Exactly.
So the scope 3 takes care of itself. So the importance of committing, of knowing that this is something that we have to achieve urgently and together, is something that many times the business sector doesn't take into consideration as so important, but quite sometimes the opposite. They remain shy. There's no longer moment for shyness. This is a moment of courage. And courage means not only committing, acting, but also embracing others.
And I think that alone, not having to worry about scope 3 emissions, that's a sell right there. Johan, of course, Exponential Roadmap unites companies who are decisive in taking action on climate. So what role can they really play?
Yeah, the companies are really the providers of the solutions, the next generation solutions, you know, in energy and transportation, nature-based solutions, next generation food, and so on, where I see that the countries should basically need to enable that. So the leading companies are developing transition plans, which basically point on how you transform your value chain to deliver on the green transition. And that will also be regulated. So every company, well, most companies will have to step up there, which is brilliant. But that needs to be matched also with national transition plans. So we actually having supply and demand working in concert, driving more towards a race to the top, basically.
Race to the top. Love
Yes.
that. Ingmar, what about you? What do you see the business role being in this green transition?
Use their voice. It's extremely important. They can't be shy. They need to be bold. And because political leaders are not listening to the citizens, the normal people, as much. Maybe they did once, but not anymore. But they do listen to business, and they certainly listen to businesses when they get together. Businesses have an extremely strong voice in two ways. They are listened to when they talk to the political leaders in the country, but they are also influencing their customers. I mean, we can take an example. Sweden is a small country. We have 10 million citizens. But if you take all the global corporation with headquarters in Sweden, IKEA is one of them, but we have many others, we're talking about billions of customers. So Swedish corporation, just to take Sweden as an example, can influence billions of people through their businesses. So they can and must use their voice.
So influence both policymakers and the general public.
Mobilize the general public and influence the policymakers.
Perfect. Good. And
Or
Marcela,
change the policymaker, not just influence.
no, change it. No, true. Marcela, maybe tell us then. You come from business, and Suzano is doing a lot, I know, on green transition and investing. Can you tell us a bit, maybe for the audience, what you do, who you are, and also, I think, how you're investing, but maybe more importantly, why are you spending money on this?
Well, so first of all, Suzano is it basically manages natural capital. So just by saying that, nature is essential to the perpetuity of our business. We've been in business for 100 years. This is the year of our centenary. And we are actually the leading company on pulp production globally. We export to over 100 countries in the world. And in Europe, for example, 1/3 of all toilet paper consumed comes from the pulp produced at Suzano. Although our business model is really different from European business model, so at Suzano and actually in the whole of Latin America, we don't use native trees to produce pulp that goes into tissue paper. We use eucalyptus trees that we plant, so everything that we use to our production is planted firstly, and we plant at Suzano over 2.7 million hectares.
Wow.
Interspersed with over 1.1 million hectares of conserved areas. We do that in a mosaic model, meaning that we intersperse native with eucalyptus in a way that we get the protection of biodiversity, we get the protection of water and other natural resources, which are fundamental to the perpetuity of our business. We are a commodity company so far, but we have been investing a lot over the last years to find other applications and uses to our raw material in order to substitute other materials and other products made from plastic. So obviously the main example is packaging and single-use plastics in general, but we're also developing textiles from eucalyptus and even material that goes into batteries for small vehicles such as motorcycles. So we are investing continuously into new markets, trying to raise the bar and trying to influence consumers to really make different choices and choose renewable-based materials and not fossil-based materials. So we've been doing that for over 100 years. And the why, I think we have many reasons for that. We do have a culture driver that says it's only good for us if it's good for the world, and we really do operate into that mindset. But we only know we know it's good for business as well. So keeping nature alive, it's essential for us living through the next 100 years.
And obviously, having been in business already for 100 years,
it gives us a long-term perspective. We grow trees, right? So it gives us a long-term perspective into many things, including how to really converge with nature.
No, and I love that it's not only about protecting what you have, but finding those new areas of growth to grow as a business and to of course be more sustainable. But Gonzalo, speaking of things that's been around for a long time, I mean, you were the climate champion already at COP25, so you've been to a few of these, and you've been in business yourself for a long time as well. What do you see, over the years that brings you a bit of optimism? Because we spoke earlier about this COP having some mixed emotions. Are we making progress, or is everything standing still? What are you seeing that gives you some optimism from the business community?
So, yeah, absolutely. Angela, you and I, we worked together in 2020 and 2021 towards COP26. And you were mostly dedicated and leading our work on electric mobility, right?
Yes.
If I take anyone here, or even like some experts on the climate agenda, and I ask them, let's go back 10 years. Let's go back to, not even 10 years, can be 8 or 9, right after the Paris Agreement, and project how many electric vehicles are going to be in Baku in 2024. what would have been the answer?
Probably less than it is, right?
0. Come on. Most of the people would have said impossible. How many possibilities do you see that in 2024 most of the investment in power will be around renewable energy, because renewable energy is going to be the cheapest and most efficient way to produce energy almost all around the globe? People would say at that time, you're crazy. That's not going to happen. And of course, I don't want to sound naive. There's so many things that are not progressing the way we would love to, and we are far from reaching our target. And there's so many elements around mostly geopolitics that is really conflicting us, right? But if we are honest to ourselves and go back 5-10 years ago and imagine what would have been projected in our brains as process of decarbonization, I can tell you, I don't imagine someone reaching this goal. Most of us, if not all of us, would have failed. Of course, we all would have expected that the process of negotiation and the financial flows coming from the commitments of countries would have gone much faster. But then if you move to the private sector of this conversation, the progress of this agenda in the minds, in the leadership, in the actions of so many companies all around the world has progressed in a way that, let's be honest, is much faster than we would have predicted at that time. So that's a message of hope. That means that we are achieving certain aspects of the agenda and that we can accelerate exponentially, as Johan probably will talk about it.
I was about to make that point, that Johan knows a bit about
it's about
exponential
that,
growth.
the exponential growth that we are seeing in some technologies and how to replicate that in some others. So for example, of course, at this point, the exponential growth of renewable energy, batteries and electric vehicles is something that we can feel absolutely proud of, because that route is already changing how the world processes. In the last 3 years, we decided to move away from coal. That wasn't evident 10 years ago.
No.
And now we feel like it was obvious. Yeah, sure. We made just for granted. We are allowing the power generation and vehicles to help us also accelerate the transition away from other fossil fuels. But then we will see very soon, as Marcela was referring to, the capacity of nature-based solutions really provoking a new tsunami of solutions, of ways to sequester carbon as a way also to revert biodiversity loss and definitely revert the land degradation. So starting to use all of the power companies like Suzano to restore soil that has been lost for a long time, and then through that help regenerate hydrological circles so we can have more and water available for many of the things that we need to see happening.
I wish I had you around every time I feel that, sustainability dip and that sustainability fatigue setting in as a burst of energy. Now I can't make the reference about you knowing everything about exponential solutions, but you get to work with climate leaders, right? These are companies who've come together to say, yes, we want to take action. So working with the leaders, what would you say is what's keeping them from going even faster? And what do you think is keeping others from joining that group of leadership?
Well, first, just to connect to Gonzalo said on exponentials. With exponentials, we tend to really underestimate the potential at the beginning because it's perceived as going really slow. And as you said, renewable energy, electrical vehicles, batteries has passed that what we call a tipping point. We get a self-sustaining snowball effect. And we have a number of solutions which are pretty close to the tipping point. We need to push them over the tipping point, which also requires incredibly bold, strong companies, but also we need the national plans to support that. Now, from the company perspective, companies realize that they can't achieve net zero on their own, which was the first idea. Of course, you do that together with your suppliers and your customers. You might have 10,000 or 100,000 peers, because that is scope 3. So it's going from your own net zero plan to actually value chain transformations. So it's much more moving towards partnership. But there you also have to think about how do you basically finance that transformation? How do you actually share that investment between the different actors? let's take, if you're making an electrical vehicle, you want to build that on fossil-free steel, aluminium, plastics and batteries. So you also have to work together with these actors, but also downstream to share the vehicles with new type of business models. So I would say the key issue today for the leaders is actually when you build this plan, how you build in profitability in the short and medium term, and how we can get basically the things in place which makes it possible to drive this in a profitable way. I think that would be the key question for most of them.
And I think you're absolutely right, because the way that global value chains are now interconnected, the automotive industry cannot decarbonize without the energy sector. So it's not even in your own supply chain, it's an ecosystem change that can only happen through collaboration, which is what great that we see, you know, these efforts like Exponential Roadmap bringing people together. But we also know it's possible, right? We see the CEO Alliance over at WEF, for instance, effectively decoupling emissions from growth. So we know it's possible. Another reason for optimism. Ingmar, you spoke about, you know, companies using their voice, influencing both the policymakers and the general public. If we think about what we're essentially talking about, the money, what is the most impactful ways, do you think, that a company can use its money?
To leverage their voice too, I will say. I will explain this. I mean, I love to hear the positive, you know, all the facts, what wasn't possible 8 years ago are suddenly now possible. Exponential solutions are scaling. No, solutions are scaling exponential. But there's just one problem with it. It's happening a little bit too late before we're risking hitting the tipping points. I mean, I'm totally convinced that the society, we are on track on becoming a fossil-free society, but we need to avoid hitting negative tipping points on the way. And there is one very big enabler for how we can speed things up, and that is money. And companies, they have a lot of money, cash in the bank. They can use that money to push, to talk with their banks about that we need to move the money. I will explain this. Today, according to EIA, we need $4.5 trillion per year invested in clean solutions. We're currently at somewhere around 1 trillion, so we're lacking 3.5 trillion. We're underfunded. On the other hand, if we take the pension funds out there, investing those companies' employees' pensions, many times the companies are paying for it, or if it's the government, they are currently investing $5.1 trillion in fossil fuel companies. So here companies, they can do two things. They can change their pension plan, moving it from investing in the problem into the solutions. So they will use their voice to talk about where they should not invest, and they will use the money to funnel it into the solutions. So we really need to move the money, and companies can do that. Many big companies, their largest carbon footprint, or one of the largest sources of, you know, emission, can come from their cash position. It's very easy to change bank. It's a lot more complicated to change supply chain. They need to do both, but change bank they can do basically over 1 week.
I can give another example.
Yes, please.
We have our own corporate venture capital at Suzano. It's a $70 million fund, and we've been investing in several different initiatives since different technologies, but also nature-based solutions for the climate agenda. But the other example I also want to make, as I said, we are on our centenary anniversary this year, and we decided not to do a big campaign, not to do a big party, but rather to invest in education for sustainability. So we have committed to up to $100 million over the next 10 years to develop leaders for sustainability. So we're partnering with several different universities in Brazil, and broadly we were just this Friday signing a partnership with Cambridge where we are investing in 4 different lines of research. So biodiversity, carbon, water, the social aspects of our business in the northern region of Brazil, and also how do we develop other indicators of sustainability for companies, but not only that, but also a scholars fund for scholarships for Brazilian students and scientists to go to Cambridge and learn how to do, hard science and come back to Brazil and help us in our sustainability agenda. So this is a lot more long-term, but we do invest in solutions, but we also are investing in future leaders to actually deploy all those solutions that we're developing today. So
That sounds a lot better than a party, I have to say, and
thanks
a gift that keeps on giving in a more positive way, maybe, than what you get the day after a party.
Imagine how that could be if all the companies would join us in this effort, and also the government would join us in this effort. So that's why collaborating and partnering is so important.
Of course, of course. So that's a great example of, how a company can invest. And Ingmar, you had another very tangible. Maybe you want
Can I
to
just add something?
Yeah,
very
no, of
quickly?
course,
I
of
think
course.
that's brilliant. I think it's very needed. And one target audience group for your education, don't forget the policymakers. They need a lot of education.
Which they could also get from listening to these types of conversation. Johan Gonzalo, if we start with you, if you then had like a magic wand, you can wave it around, and top 5 Fortune 500 companies take their money and they invest it in one specific thing. What would you hope, Johan, that they would invest their money in?
I think they need to take an overall perspective. So if they look at their particular value chain, one thing which is essential is, of course, to identify which are the key parts. Where do you need to invest in disruptive solutions and technologies actually to enable the absolute green transition? So that is one part. That could be upstream or downstream. They also need to look at off-take agreements and the opportunity to actually support. That could be to help drive regen agriculture, for example, sustainable forestry. They should invest in that. If they're a food company, for example, heavily invest in that, so you can actually help to get the new entrepreneurs on board. So these were 2 examples. And then, of course, I like to connect to what Ingmar said, because we developed this Green in Cash action guide, how to make it simple for companies to start up their dialogue with their banks, which is actually possible today to do from today. So these are a couple of examples.
So let me first add another example that I'm very impressed with, and I love it. It's Maersk as one of the, if not the biggest vessel and shipping company in the world. I remember very well in the moment when we were absolutely perceiving that shipping was a hard to abate sector, really complex. And then it came to Maersk under the leadership of Jens Nabe to say, you know what, this is not the world that will help us be successful for the next decades. And we need to take some action on leadership and order for the engineers and for the providers to design the vessel. It's like, I want to buy that vessel that doesn't exist because that is needed. And all of a sudden they asked for, I remember the first 7 or so back in 2021. At that point, the tension with the IMO was definite until last year.
Yeah.
So the IMO, International Maritime Organization, was going like, no, I don't know if we're going to be able, like, what is it, tariffs or carbon costs? And then all of a sudden, you now have the IMO with a commitment to reach net zero by 2050, and the targets of decarbonizing the shipping sector went from 5% to 10%. It's like incredible, massive impact, not only in a company like Maersk and then all of their providers, but also for most companies in the world. The shipping sector is nothing but their scope 3, and therefore they're facilitating the decarbonization of many other industries at the same time. I think that we're in a moment where we need courage and clarity. Let's imagine that any of us is an astronaut that goes to Mars. What would be your first your first investment? Water.
Of course.
If you don't have water, I mean, you would do anything. right? The first thing that you should do is invest in water. And we're in a point that we have damaged this world in a way that we're going back to that level of roots. We should be investing in water as a capacity to restore and regenerate nature, and that might allow us to start projecting humans developing sustainably for the next, let's say, centuries ahead. But if we don't go back to the roots and keep on thinking that we can keep on damaging the environment, well, we might end living in a place like Mars.
Yeah, that's very true. So we've talked now about businesses, but we are at COP29 after all, and I wouldn't be a good moderator if I didn't ask you the one question that we are all trying to figure out here. So very quickly, because we don't have much time left, what are you hoping to see at this COP? What changes, what progress, what are you hoping that we will leave this week with? And Ingmar, I think we'll start with you and work our way down the line.
This is supposed to be the finance COP, so what I hope this COP will solve how to move the money from the problem into the solutions. And that is my biggest hope. And also realize that we don't have time to wait for next COP. We don't have time for another COP. We need to start today.
Perfect. Johan?
I really like to see this race of winning transition plans from companies and from nations, you know, basically aligned, which could become this race to the top, where actually companies and nations realize that they can build the new economy and the new wealth by actually putting very progressive transition plans and targets in place.
So my main hope for this week and for COP is to have a great outcome of G20 in Rio de Janeiro. I think that will be really important for the climate agenda.
Perfect.
And just building on everything, since we're hosting COP next year in Brazil, we really hope for good momentum going to COP30. It's very important that we have a lot of stuff decided this week and on the road to COP30, and we really wish for COP30 to be a milestone, an important milestone in the climate agenda.
Then I propose that the five of us meet again a year from now in Brazil during COP30. Thank you so much for joining me and discussing this. I know we could have talked for 2 hours more, but unfortunately we don't have time for that either. So thank you so much to all panelists, and thank you so much everyone at home for tuning in. And let's continue the conversation about financing the green transition everywhere we go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks very much, Angela, and the guests for a great panel discussion. We're not at the end here, though. We've got two final super guests for this session, two financial players who are working actively on climate solutions. On the magic of Zoom, we have Fredrik Ulbert, founder and CFO of Carbon Pool. And then we've got Linji Liu, Head of ESG, that's Environment, Social and Governance and Sustainability at Hultberg and Partners, also coming in on the magic of Zoom. So Fredrik, let me turn to you first. For those who might not know, what is Carbon Pool?
Thank you, Victor. It's,
Victor, it's Nick actually, it's Nick.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
The names are still wrong on the Zoom.
Really? Unbelievable.
Well, it's good that we got that out of the way.
Tell us about Carbon Pool.
Thank you for introducing me as a super guest. That is quite touching. Carbon Pool is the response of insurance people to what can we do as an industry to really help in the net zero transition and to really enable other players to scale the kinds of solutions that we need. And what makes Carbon Pool different, and in this case, unique is one of those terms that gets used way too much, but in our case, we are actually unique because to the best of our knowledge, there's no one else doing exactly what we're doing. We are the world's first, soon-to-be fully regulated Swiss insurer to pay claims and insure our clients in kind. What that means in terms of net zero is with the ability to pay claims in carbon credits, carbon removals. We have the world's first balance sheet as an insurance company. We invest the majority of our assets in carbon removals. And what that allows us to do is to provide a credible solution for permanence. So let's say you have a project that is subject to certain risks that might lead to the carbon you've sequestered reversing. We can insure you against those reversal events, and in case a reversal event occurs, we can pay you out in other carbon credits. What that does is it gives you a credible claim as to if something goes wrong, there's another carbon credit to back it up. If you're a corporate buyer, what it allows you to do is receive the currency you actually need for your net zero strategy. And also from the atmosphere's perspective, it's the only way you can ensure that a credit is that your project actually does what it claims on the tin. The other thing we can do is we can ensure projects more long-term and give delivery guarantees. And that's very important for financing, to be able to get more long-term and more cost-efficient financing from banks.
So basically, if you invest in a forest and it burns down, then they hope they're insured with Carbon Pool, yeah?
Correct.
Yeah,
and
okay.
What that allows you to do is actually to invest in forests in a credible way.
Yeah,
One
Got
of the
you.
key criticisms of these nature-based solutions is that they're not permanent, they're subject to risk.
Yeah.
What we're saying here is, as an industry, we've been able to manage that for many years. We just need to give it a small twist, and the twist is the ability to pay in carbon, and that's what we do.
Yeah, good. All right, let's go to, am I right calling you Linji?
Ling Yi. Yes.
Okay, Lingi. Okay, that's much better. Thank you so much for clearing that up. Tell us a little bit and tell the audience about Soderberg and Partners.
Yes, of course. Hultberg Partners is one of the largest financial advisors in the Nordics, and we operate outside of the Nordics as well, in the Netherlands, in UK, in Spain, in Luxembourg as well. And we are financial advisors regarding investment, but also work with insurance intermediary. And so what we do is that we integrate sustainability in our core business. We have a sustainability analysis of over 3,600 financial products, including insurance products. And we provide this analysis and ratings, sustainability ratings of financial products to support clients who want to invest and choose sustainable products to make these sustainable choices.
Is that easy?
Not in this landscape. And I'm sure we will be talking about it further on, but the landscape has been changing quite a lot during the past 5 years, I would say.
Yeah. So maybe to both of you, from your perspectives, what roles do finance and the chief finance officer play in a company's strategy discussions as it relates to sustainability and environmental strategies? And can you give any examples from your own companies or your own kind of business world? Who would like to start first? Okay, Frederick.
Oh, I was going to give the stage.
Oh, I thought you were saying me. Okay.
I was not raising my hand. It was. But,
okay.
Happy to do so. So
okay.
my short answer to that is currently not enough.
Right.
And
right.
I will justify in the following way. So we talk to a lot of large corporates, and many of them that are kind of on the cutting edge of coming up with credible net zero plans, because obviously, since a lot of what we do on the insurance side is voluntary, we engage mainly with those players that take their net zero strategies very seriously. And what we see is that they tend to have very strong teams on the science and sustainability side that are very well positioned to evaluate the kind of projects they're investing in, to evaluate their decarbonization plans. A perspective that we believe will be very helpful, and regulation will probably push to that, is the CFO's office becoming involved in terms of thinking of the net zero strategy in terms of what are the risks, what are the financial liabilities you're taking on long term, how do you think about your transition strategy in terms of investing, in terms of creating assets, in terms of having proper carbon accounting in place so that you know what kind of long-term liabilities you're taking on in terms of, one, decarbonizing, but also in terms of investing in projects that actually sequester CO2 long-term. And lastly, that risk view is actually quite important. It's very important to make sure that your transition plan is scientifically sound. That's kind of the first thing you have to do, obviously. But then if you're thinking about it from a firm's perspective with other stakeholders, investors, a board, one of the things you want to also look into is what does this look like long term? What kind of risks am I taking on? And what are my risk mitigation measures other than doing good due diligence and having credible plans in place? And that's where we are looking forwards to CFOs becoming more and more involved. In the EU, that will likely happen with the new reporting requirements, where obviously reporting is very much a CFO's office kind of activity. And as finance officers become more and more engaged in looking at what are our emissions, what are we doing in terms of decarbonization, what are we doing in terms of offsetting, in terms of removals, we hope that natural transition will also lead to these finance teams asking the questions as to what is our long-term procurement strategy, what is our long-term risk mitigation strategy, and how do we also make sure that this is successful from a financial perspective.
Okay, Ling Yi?
I think there are several key points here. One is what is the role of the CFO, and also the other one is what can the role of CFO become or be. And I would say that CFOs are very crucial in climate transition of the business, and also could be the champion for climate transition, both within the company, but also for the industry as whole, depending on where the company is operating. If you look at traditional role of the CFO, it's usually risk management, as Frederick alluded to. It's financial stability. Here we are seeing that CFO who are involved in climate strategy are really looking at new risks, such as climate risk, nature risks as well, but also resource scarcity, because resource efficiency is inherently included in the sustainability agenda, and it's also a way to reduce costs. So cost efficiency is also very much linked to the role of CFO, and how can you really use resources more efficiently, secure the supply chain of resources to really manage that operational risk, but also that natural risk. And then you also have, the visionary long-term growth, strategic growth, profit maximization part, which is, how can you perhaps leverage carbon pricing mechanism, both in the industry, but also within the company, to help the company transition towards more sustainable operations. And the third one, I would say, is performance measurement, performance reporting related to investors and investment overall, because this is a way to measure how good is the company. But then company perform both short-term and long-term in terms of financial performance. So you can have basically the KPIs you design and you report to the investors will be crucial for how you look at the business performance and in relation to climate strategy. Do you align strategic initiatives with your climate goals, with your net zero strategy, for example? And also, do you attract the investors that are aligned with your own net zero strategy? That is, you could also have financing from investors that really support your net zero strategy, or you could have the opposite, that not really believe in climate and transition and really is focused on the short-term profitability. So there is I would say those parts, here is where the CFOs play a crucial role in the development of the company, but also in relation to who are the investors, where do you get finance, how do you manage your risks, and how do you measure performance overall, and how is that aligned with your climate strategy?
So just so that the audience can understand, because they're not all finance experts, so Soderberg and Partners, you have clients. Let me get this right, or if I'm wrong, just tell me. You have clients out there that want to make investments, and you basically scour and analyze the landscape of potential investments that they could make, and hopefully you're trying to direct them towards the most sustainable investments possible, because that's sort of in your DNA that you want to move the story forward in terms of sustainability. And then Fredericks, you've got a new business, a new company that's offering a very unusual or unique package for people that want to invest in nature and ways of removing carbon, like forests, for example. And you are looking for people that want to insure those investments in a new and novel and an interesting way. So you're kind of both slightly on the different sides of the story, in a sense. I mean, it might be that Ling Yi might have some clients that want to insure an investment in forests and might scour the landscape and come across carbon pool and work out whether that's a good idea. And you obviously need people like Soderberg and Partners to make sure that you're on the landscape, if I can put it that way. Is that the kind of relationship between the two of you, in general?
In general, yes.
Okay, all right. I think it's important just to clarify that for the viewers.
In general, yes, but I'll do some free advertisement for Soderberg. You look at it more broadly.
Yeah.
So Carbon Pool is very much about looking at what's out there in terms of projects that are insurable.
Yeah.
And what can we do to help those projects scale by insuring them? Because the interesting thing is, insurance is one of those mechanisms that we're just used to having. So we can't really imagine a world without insurance. But when we're looking at the net zero transition, almost everything we do is uninsured. And that is holding back a lot of the investment, because investors are risk averse. They don't want to do things where there's the real possibility that they will lose their entire investment. Right.
So is that correct, Ling Yi? Is that correct that a lot of sustainability investments are not classically insurable, or is that?
I think it's a great point. If we go back to what is the role of Soderberg and Partners, I would just add that Soderberg Partners as financial advisors do not invest directly in companies, or we rarely do. Only a small portion of our investment go into companies as direct shareholders. We usually invest in funds, and so we scout and screen for sustainable funds for
Right.
our clients. And that is also the reason why we make this sustainability assessment of funds mostly.
Right.
And then we also assess insurance companies. And that is where I think the direct link to carbon poor is okay, how do insurance companies look at new businesses, and do they assess risk in a way that they account for carbon risk and climate risk? Because when insurance companies assess risk, they base it on historical risk, which means that because climate risk is something that we usually haven't seen in the past, or it's difficult to quantify for insurance companies.
Right.
It poses additional risk, which means that some of the companies that are in renewable energy production, really innovative technologies, their risks, operational risk, and so on, are not quantifiable, which poses a risk for the insurance companies. And that makes it difficult for insurance companies to sometimes actually insure new businesses. And so what is important here is also that carbon pool provides a credibility to new projects and ensures that stability, if I've understood Frederick correctly, ensures that stability in the financial
Right.
systems, so that it takes away some of that risk that perhaps traditional finance and traditional investments, insurance, are not willing to take today.
Okay. Okay. So we're rapidly running out of time, but as you know, here we're at COP29 in Baku on the Caspian Sea, and last week it was said that the governments had finally signed off on Article 6, better known as like the carbon markets, which has taken a long time since Glasgow a few years ago when they said they signed off on it. Will this help your work, Frederick? And does it help your work as well, Ling Yi, that there is hopefully some stable structure now in this? I'll have to rush you both. Yeah.
I'll be very quick then. So the answer is yes, it definitely helps our work. Especially for the biggest lever for us is to have compliance markets that allow us to diversify the risk that we're taking, but that also create credible standards that many market participants accept. One of the challenges we face in the BCM currently is that lack of a standard. A globally accepted one is wonderful, so yes, Article 6 definitely helps our business.
Good. And Ling Yi, does that help with you making choices on behalf of investors in projects if you feel that there's a kind of now a market that the governments will accept?
I will be even shorter. So what carbon markets essentially do is put a price on carbon, right? And since we operate in the free market and financial markets are really pricing in future cash flows and projections of future growth, then this is really something that adds to efficiency in the market, which then in turn will enhance the whole transition journey, I think.
Okay. Sorry, we could talk more. I have thousands of questions to ask you here, but we don't have time as the show is called. So thank you very much both for being with us. And that marks the end of this session. I will now like to hand over to my colleague Katarina Rolsdotter Jansen for a very interesting session on the role of civil climate engagement to accelerate the green transition. So let's move on.